you deal with making a call to the security and the wrong security and whatever, not too important. But what you don't deal with was what was the situation at that time with the woman screaming. You agree?
Milady, that is correct.
You don't deal with it in your statement. Now, will you accept it when I put it to you that likewise, and the statement is before court as Exhibit M, likewise, your wife deals with the telephone call to security and also in a statement does not deal with whether they were screaming at that time. Will you accept that?
I accept that, yes.
Yeah. Or whether she heard screaming or whether they were screaming, whatever, same as yours. Both of you in your statements did not deal with it. However, in cross-examination, I asked her about it. And she said words to the effect that at that time she was not focusing on concentrating on the screaming because of the telephone. You understand?
I do.
Of significance yesterday, without the state prompting you, no question from the state in that regard, you tendered evidence consistent with that of your wife that she had not dealt with in her affidavit to say, the state didn't ask you about it. I didn't pay any attention to any sounds coming from the house or the direction. How is that? How is that your wife was cross-examined? It's not in your statement. It is not in her statement. She was then cross-examined about the screening at the time of the telephone call. And she said that she was focusing on something else, meaning she didn't pay attention. You then, out of your own accord, without the state asking you, go there and say, without anyone asking you, I didn't pay attention to that. How's that?
It's quite simple. It's notes that I made to myself after the advice of Advocate Nikki Maritz, and I've obviously reviewed those notes to remind myself. That's a note that I made that I did not pay attention or wasn't aware of any sounds that came from the direction of where the incident happened because I was focusing on the telephone call.
Can we see the notes?
I don't have a printed copy available.
Can you tell someone where it is and go and fetch it whilst you're in court? That we can look at the notes.
I have no problem with that. I have a copy on my iPad, which is in the witness room back.
Well, so we can print it, and those notes were made before your statement.
That is correct, yes.
And you agree that you give that note to Captain van Aert?
I did not. I informed him about it, my lady, and he said I must keep it in a safe place.
And your first statement that you made to the two policemen that came, where is that? Did you keep a copy of that?
I did not receive a copy of that, my lady. It was I would term it as just a casual conversation relating...
Did you not make a written statement?
Not that first evening, my lady.
Not the first evening, sorry, you just referred to that statement in your evidence.
Yeah, so there were two visits. The one evening was by the two investigating officers, my lady. And then in the following week, Captain Mike van Aert contacted me, made an appointment, and that's when I made my first official statement.
Your iPad will of course show when you put the notes on your iPad. Did you put it on at that time or was it more recent?
My lady, I have a copy. The notes were made on my personal laptop computer, and I've kept it there, a copy. Last night I converted the notes to a PDF format and transferred it to my iPad.
So we will be able to see when the first note was made.
My lady, I think it would be possible to derive that from the file history. From the,
But we will get it during the adjournment. We'll get the notes, and surely you're satisfied to show it to us.
absolutely.
And what caused you to make that note?
It was, my lady, it was on the advice of Advocate Nikki Maritz. He said that normally these cases take a very long time before they are heard before a court, and your memory will fade. So he advised us to make notes in as much detail as we can remember, to rely on to refresh your memory later on.
But it's a bit different, because this is not a note of what you observed. It's a note of what you did not observe. It's a negative. That's why I'm asking.
My lady, the note, the content of the note describes the entire experience. What I did, I make explicit mention of the fact that I did not pay attention to the sounds from the direction of where the lady's screams were coming. It's one sentence and probably a 1.5 page document.
We'll look at the notes. That's not too important. Well. Now let's go to the next point. In your statement, and I want you to read it out, paragraph 6. Just before the shots. I can help you. It says, ek het die vrou gehoor gil. You see that?
I do.
Now, in your wife's statement, she says the same thing in paragraph 6. Ek het die vrou gehoor gil, meaning I heard the woman screaming or yelling.
I accept that.
Yes. However, in your evidence, you then describe the screaming. You defined that. You said that it was more intense. You could hear the fear. You remember that? Would that be correct?
Are you referring to my testimony yesterday?
Yes.
Yes, my lady, I remember that.
Is that in your note?
I can't recall.
Yes. Now, what is significant? In your wife's evidence, not in a statement, she also defines or describes just the one word gil or the yell or the scream to say that it was more intense and she could hear the fear. Exactly the same. And it is remarkable that it is not in her statement, not in your statement. She testified about it to describe, and you come and you testify about it in the same manner. Can you explain that?
It's, I would venture a guess that it's the way you verbally tell the story.
Yes.
There's a lot more emotion involved when you convey the experience,
Yes.
Where the statement is more factual.
Well, let's go on. Let's go to screams. If you look at paragraph 6, I read to you, first die Afrikaans, ek het die vrou gehoor gil en toe 'n sarsie skote gehoor. Translate, I heard a woman screaming and then I heard a volley of shots. Are you satisfied with my translation?
I'm satisfied.
Is that what you meant to tell the person that took the statement from you?
That is correct, yes.
Yes. In your wife's statement, it starts the same. She heard the woman screaming and then 4 shots. You just had a volley of shots. She had 4. I heard the woman screaming and then the shots. So that's in her statement, that's in your statement. However, in her evidence, she said, and she used now explicit words, that she heard the screaming also during the shots. You have that?
Yes, I do.
You come to court yesterday and you testified now with explicit language that you don't have to infer from it that you heard the shots, the screams, also screams during the shots. You agree?
I agree. That is exactly what I heard.
Let's go to the first one. Next one. Let's go to your statement, paragraph 6. You say, and I first read the Afrikaans that you can find it. Die laaste gil was net na die laaste skoot. 1 tot 2 secondes, meaning the last scream was just after the last shot, plus minus 1 to 2 seconds. You have that?
I do.
Your wife's evidence, not evidence, statement. The woman gave the last scream about 2 seconds after the shots. You see that? But when your wife came to give evidence, she said the following. She said that the last scream, she said, I heard the voice fading away with the last scream. Significantly, when you gave evidence yesterday, as it was not stated in your statement and your wife's statement, but in her evidence, you said the following. The last scream, it faded moments after the shot. The fading. She spoke about the fading of the scream after the last shot, and you speak about the fading. How is that?
When we had to testify, my lady, or not testify, make the statement, I used the indication of seconds to indicate a very short duration. I chose different words. If I have to describe it verbally, that's how I would explain it. I think the 1 or 2 seconds perhaps came in response to a question from Captain van Aert, how long? I'm fairly certain that I would have given him a similar version, verbal explanation of moments after the last shot, the last scream faded away. And then I think he asked me how long were the moments, and to try and peg a time frame on it, I probably said 1 or 2 seconds, or it could be half a second.
Mr. Johnson, it's not about the time. It's about the exact same word. Not in your statements, only in her evidence. Fading. And then in your evidence, fading. That's what it's all about. Now, it may be a remarkable coincidence, but I'm dealing with 6 of them now in a row. You understand? I've taken the first one, the time, where it then became exactly a time. And so I went through it. I don't want to repeat it. I'm now with the one fading. Do you want to give an explanation again about the coincidence of using the same word that she used on a cross-examination that was not part of your statement?
Lady, I'm satisfied with my explanation.
Would it be part of your notes?
Milady, can Advocate Reeva just clarify what you are referring to?
You know your notes that you have on your laptop?
I mean, what in the notes?
The fading.
We would have to go and look at the notes,
see,
my lady.
Of course. Well, let's go on, Mr. Johnson. Let's go to paragraph 6 still of your statement. In your statement, paragraph 6, when you describe the shots, you refer to it. I first give you the Afrikaans. You say, en toe 'n sarsie skote, then a volley of shots. We all know in Afrikaans and in English a volley, exactly what it is. Now, your wife gave evidence to say after the first shot there was a small pause. Couldn't give the time, but there was a small pause. When you gave evidence yesterday, what did you say about the duration between the shots instead of a volley of shots? What did you say? Can you remember?
I recall, my lady, that I testified that there was a pause between the first shot and the shots that followed.
A small pause between the first shot and the other shots. Exactly the same as your wife's evidence. Not in her statement, not in your statement. You agree?
I agree.
How is that? Is that a coincidence?
My lady, I don't think it's such a big coincidence if two people stand 10 meters apart from each other witnessing the same incident, that they would have such similar recollections of the event.
It is not that, Mr. Johnson. It is where it differs from your statement. It is not the same. It's not contained in your statement, and it was in her evidence, and then it is in your evidence, and then I start to understand, or maybe not understand, why you did not give evidence directly after your wife's evidence. You were available. What was in it? Why did you just not come and give evidence after her evidence?
My lady, is Mr. Roo referring to yesterday?
Yes.
I did give... No, I don't know.
Ms. van der Merwe was called in between, so as to have that opening period.
My lady, I'm sure she wouldn't mind me volunteering this information. She was extremely nervous and kept on saying to us she cannot take another day of this. She wants to carry on with her life, and I think for that reason Advocate Nell obliged and gave her the opportunity to testify yesterday.
When did she tell you that? After her evidence?
My lady, no, that was during our period that we waited there. She said she was going to request that she could testify.
During what period?
My lady, it's during the period that we waited in the witness room, the past day or two.
The two of you waiting in the witness room. When was that?
All the witnesses are congregated together in a room on the first floor.
In the same room?
That is correct.
You and your wife as well?
Before she testified, we were there together, and during the breaks I saw her once or twice.
So you saw your wife during the breaks, and after her evidence, because there was nothing stopping you to come give evidence, you saw her again, Mr. Johnson?
My lady, I don't think it's so strange. We live together. We were going to be together.
I'm not asking if it's strange. I just want to put a factual position before the court. You saw her again after her evidence and before you gave evidence. You came into the box.
That is correct, my lady.
But yet you would say all these remarkable points of similarity between your evidence not to be found in your statement and her statement, that we could ascribe to coincidence.
My lady, I don't think it's coincidence. When my wife testified, she's been an aerobic instructor for close to 20 years, part-time hobby, so she counts rhythms and numbers. She plays piano up to a quite advanced level, so instinctively she counts it. I don't pay attention to that detail. That's why I couldn't say there were exactly 4 shots. I estimated 5 or 6, I think.
Mr. Johnson, maybe I must stop you. You don't know what you're doing to yourself. Because that was solely in her evidence, what you've just said, and not in a statement. What you have just told the court is to confirm what I'm putting to you over and over. And here you come and you tender it. You did not discuss the matter, you said before the time. I asked you all the questions. And now she told you about counting, because of her musical background, the shots. That was in her evidence, not in her statement.
It's something we discussed, and we said we wonder why she would remember the exact number. And that's what our conclusion was.
So was that after her evidence, before you came in?
No, my lady. It was way back, I think even before we made our statements. There was quite a long period after the event until we made our first statements.
You see, Mr. Johnson, you told the court, I asked you right in the beginning, but for emotional support, after your statements you did not discuss it. That aspect is not in her statement. It came out when she was confronted on hearing the 4 shots and why she could say it's 4 shots. It was not something old. It came out in cross-examination, or an examination chief, I can't remember. But in her evidence, not in her statement. You saw her after her evidence. And now you come without me asking you. You tendered an additional coincidence. That's what I'm putting to you. You discussed her evidence, and I will argue to the court, it is just too remarkable that that you did not come and give evidence after your wife, first call someone else, let you and your wife be together, make sure that you patch and that the evidence is consistent, like fading, like pause between the shots, now like the music counting. You understand? You understand what I put to you, Mr. Johnson? You shake your head. Do you understand?
I understand what the advocate is saying, but I can honestly tell you we did not discuss her evidence. I mean her testimony.
Yes.
I can give you my honest word.
You know, in my experience, I don't want to say it's applicable to you, but once witnesses start to introduce the word honestly, then I wonder about it, because right from the beginning it should have been honestly. You don't have to say it. What worries me, Mr. Johnson, let me explain something to you. This court is really entitled to something, and that is that witnesses come to court not contaminated, uncontaminated, give that independent version so that the court can listen to this witness and to the other one, because witnesses are not always reliable. Sometimes they're not lying, but there are many times a reliability issue. And the only way to satisfy yourself then about reliability is to maintain a strong independence in versions. You have not favored the court with that, Mr. Johnson, you and your wife. I'm sorry, I put it to you. You could just as well stood together in the witness box. That's what I put to you. What do you say to that?
I don't agree with your statement.
Aren't you going a bit too far, Mr. Rowe?
Maybe I won't, it's for the court to decide, my lady, I won't take it to that point. I withdraw that. Now, Mr. Johnson, the screaming that you say in your evidence that you heard when you back on the balcony, you said it was screaming and then shots. How long was that screaming?
Milady, it's a long time ago. I can't recall in exact detail.
So you have a difficulty, and that's fair, I understand it, Mr. Johnson. You have a difficulty when you think, and maybe you experience that as traumatic. You have a difficulty to remember accurately when you're back on the balcony, you heard screaming, but how long, if it was short or long. You can't remember.
All I can offer you is that I heard screaming.
You don't know if it was long before the shots or short before the shots. You only remember screaming. Is that correct?
It's difficult to judge the amount of time that lapsed. So, and my short might be your long.
Yes.
So I don't want to peg a time on it. It was there were the screams and then the shot started.
Your wife spoke, but maybe if you don't know, then you don't know. Spoke about moments. But you can't remember.
It's not that I can't put a time duration on it. It didn't feel like long. Didn't feel like long, but the whole experience didn't feel like very long.
And we know that you're standing outside on the balcony when you hear what you describe as shots. And so when I refer to shots, please understand me, Mr. Johnson, that I'm not submitting to you that they were indeed shots. I'll come back to that. But just for ease of reference, I refer to them for present purposes as shots. So let me repeat again, just to put that to you. You were standing outside on the balcony, and your wife was inside the house when you heard the shots.
That is correct, my lady.
But you were not able to hear the number of the shots, the number.
My lady, I did not count the shots. I heard a number of shots, but I did not count them. I estimated 5 or 6 shots.
Yeah. Was it difficult to count them at the time? Is it, or just because that you, as you sit here, that it's a long time ago and it's difficult to remember?
It was even afterwards, my lady, shortly afterwards in my first versions of the events, I also did not know how many shots were fired. I only learned that afterwards.
You also, sorry, the last part, I couldn't hear you.
I said that only afterwards I'd learned that from probably in the media or perhaps Captain Mike van Aert. It was confirmed by some other person or source.
Maybe I understand now better one of the things that you said in your evidence yesterday when you spoke about people, that you assumed that there were many people much closer to Mr. Pistorius' house. Then you added that would have a much clearer recollection and would have heard more clearly what had happened.
That is
your evidence
correct.
yesterday? It
That is
tells
correct,
me
my lady.
something that you acknowledged that there was some problem. It was not that clear and your recollection was not that good. Because that's why you defer to or hoping to defer to people that would have heard clearer. Would that be unfair?
My lady, I do not agree with that statement.
What did you mean to say by saying with a much clearer recollection and that would have heard more clearly? People closer that would have heard more clearly.
What I meant that is that the assumption is the closer you are, the more detail you can hear.
Excuse me, I couldn't hear that. I'm so sorry that I do that to you. I have difficulty in hearing.
What I said, my lady, is that my assumption was if you were closer, if there were people closer to the house, they would be able to hear more clearly and perhaps more detail.
Who was first to wake up that morning because of what you say, the screaming?
My lady, I woke up first.
So you woke up first, and it's, if I look at your evidence, your wife, you heard the scream that you thought you woke up by the screaming. You then listened, you heard the scream again, and then you jumped up. Is that not so?
My lady, can I just ask the advocate to repeat that statement, please?
Thank you, I will. You woke up, of course it's difficult, you were sleeping, thinking that it was a scream. You then listened, you heard a scream again, and then you jumped out of bed.
That is correct, my lady.
And it is only then, if I look at your evidence, when you jumped out of bed, that your wife woke up.
Yes, that is what she told me.
Yes. And now you're up. What is the position that you hear the scream then again when you're on the balcony?
Yes, my lady, I ran out to the balcony and the The next screams that I observed was when I was outside on the balcony.
Yes. So let's deal with this. You woke up. There's uncertainty. What woke you up? Because you said you listen now carefully to make sure. Then you heard the scream.
Yes, the second screams was a confirmation that I heard correctly the first scream.
Yes, the first one there was uncertainty. I'm not saying they didn't hear, but there was uncertainty. Let's go straight to that point. So the first scream is uncertainty, but the second scream you could hear it now, and that caused you to jump up.
That is correct, my lady.
Yes. Then let's call it the third scream. Let's give the first one also a title as the first scream. The third scream you heard when you were on the balcony.
That is correct.
And how many screams were there? That was then the woman screaming, help, and you heard a man just after that screaming, help, help, help.
No, my lady, when I got to the balcony, there were just screams, and I stood there for a short time. It's difficult for me to give you an indication how long it was. And then listening to hear if I can hear any detail. And then the lady person screamed help, and it was followed by a man shouting help, help.
Yeah. Just to, if I may rewind, Mr. Johnson, you said, and correctly so, that was your evidence, and you also said today that your wife told you that, she confirmed to you, that after the first scream, you jumped out of bed. That caused your wife to wake up. You're jumping out of bed. You then ran to the balcony. Correct this far?
That is correct.
Then on the balcony, you again then heard the scream or screaming.
That is correct, my lady.
So what we do know from this is that when your wife woke up, you would have been on the balcony, and that would be the first time that she would hear the screaming, when you're on the balcony. According to your version.
I don't have a printed copy available.
Can you tell someone where it is and go and fetch it whilst you're in court? That we can look at the notes.
I have no problem with that. I have a copy on my iPad, which is in the witness room back.
Well, so we can print it, and those notes were made before your statement.
That is correct, yes.
And you agree that you give that note to Captain van Aert?
I did not. I informed him about it, my lady, and he said I must keep it in a safe place.
And your first statement that you made to the two policemen that came, where is that? Did you keep a copy of that?
I did not receive a copy of that, my lady. It was I would term it as just a casual conversation relating...
Did you not make a written statement?
Not that first evening, my lady.
Not the first evening, sorry, you just referred to that statement in your evidence.
Yeah, so there were two visits. The one evening was by the two investigating officers, my lady. And then in the following week, Captain Mike van Aert contacted me, made an appointment, and that's when I made my first official statement.
Your iPad will of course show when you put the notes on your iPad. Did you put it on at that time, or was it more recent?
My lady, I have a copy. The notes were made on my personal laptop computer, and I've kept it there, a copy. Last night I converted the notes to a PDF format and transferred it to my iPad.
So we will be able to see when the first note was made.
My lady, I think it would be possible to derive that from the file history.
But we will get it during the adjournment. We'll get the notes, and surely you're satisfied to show it to us.
Absolutely.
And what caused you to make that note?
It was, my lady, it was on the advice of Advocate Nikki Maritz. He said that normally these cases take a very long time before they are heard before a court, and your memory will fade. So he advised us to make notes in as much.
You deal with making a call to the security and the wrong security and whatever, not too important. But what you don't deal with was what was the situation at that time with the woman screaming. You agree?
My lady, that is correct.
You don't deal with it in your statement. Now, will you accept it when I put it to you that likewise and the statement is before court as Exhibit M. Likewise, your wife deals with the telephone call to security and also in a statement does not deal with whether they were screaming at that time. Will you accept that?
I accept that, yes.
Yeah. Or whether she heard screaming or whether they were screaming, whatever. Same as yours. Both of you in your statements did not deal with it. However, how is that? How is that your wife was cross-examined? It's not in your statement. It is not in her statement. She was then cross-examined about the screening at the time of the telephone call. And she said that she was focusing on something else, meaning she didn't pay attention. You then, out of your own accord, without the state asking you, go there and say, without anyone asking you, I didn't pay attention to that. How's that?
It's quite simple. It's notes that I made to myself after the advice of Advocate Nikki Maritz. And I've obviously reviewed those notes to remind myself that's a note that I made, that I did not pay attention or wasn't aware of any sounds that came from the direction where the incident happened because I was focusing on the telephone call.
Can we see the note? In cross-examination, I asked her about it. And she said words to the effect that at that time she was not focusing on concentrating on the screaming because of the telephone. You understand?
I do.
Of significance yesterday, without the state prompting you, no question from the state in that regard, you tendered evidence consistent with that of your wife that she had not dealt with in her affidavit, to say, the state didn't ask you about it. I didn't pay any attention to any sounds coming from the house or the direction.